Good morning, NIA families. Welcome to another parent engagement workshop. Happy to have you all joining today. Today's topic is restorative practices. We're going to talk a little bit about what restorative practices is all about, what it can look like from the parent's end. We'll talk a little bit about what it looks like in our school framework as a adopted approach to behavior management, building community, and ways that we develop relationships in our classroom, and how we hope that parents can use some of these approaches at home to develop these same approaches. So some of the learning targets we're going to discuss are a little bit about the old school approach to discipline, the traditional style approach to discipline versus the restorative discipline. And so restorative processes are an approach in which we kind of stay clear and kind of gear away from some of the traditional approaches to disciplining students. And so we'll talk a little bit about the theory of restorative practices, some of the values that it hopes to develop. And so there's some skill development there. The 5 magic restorative questions, which we'll talk a little bit about. And are they magic? In some aspects, they seem to transform the outcomes and give us yield a little bit of better results in what we're looking for. And then what is a restorative community? And then what it would look like to have a restorative home when it comes to managing your child's behavior. So restorative practices are founded in the philosophy and principles of restorative justice. And when we talk about restorative justice, we're talking about having a democratic approach to relationships and a community in which everyone is heard and everyone's feelings and position, whether they are at fault or not, is considered in trying to reframe the situation to make sure that everyone feels a sense of justice. And justice, according to the restorative community, is that consideration of everyone's rights, regardless if they've made errors, made mistakes in behavior or not. The number one thing we all agree on as educators and recommend to highlight to parents is you have to be consistent in whatever you're doing. The approach, if we try something for a day or 2 or 3, and then go back to doing something else with our children, it causes a lot of confusion, and it ends up where we lose credibility as the person in charge. And so that consistency is what yields results and the positive outcomes that we're looking for. So we can't change things up. We can't do something one day, do something different the next. That really throws children off, and it really creates a lack of trust and the inability to really have a sense of accountability for children, as they don't feel that we really mean what we say when we do it once or twice and then we don't follow up or follow through thereafter. So the consistent approach, like here in the image, is what yields positive results. So looking at the approach to the traditional versus the punitive discipline process, we're looking at traditional approaches. It's more so about punishment and rewards. And so in restorative practices, we're not looking at necessarily a reward for good behavior, but teaching good behavior in the sense that it is what's expected in positive relationships. So making good choices doesn't necessarily get a reward or get a monetary kind of recognition, but positive praise and recognition through child being recognized with kind words, with affirmation, with positive praise, and so punishment just the same. So bear with me just a second. There we go. Thank you. So when we look at restorative practices, we're not considering that rewards and punishments are part of the teaching process. With restorative practices, it is embedded in the teaching and the learning for students. So we're looking at encouragement and praise when children make good choices and are sharing and showing respect to one another, embedded within our day-to-day practices. We consider restorative approaches in any environment in making it a very positive, warm, welcoming, and equitable environment where all students are treated in a sense of equality, regardless of having behavioral challenges, making mistakes in their behavior, not following classroom expectations or school expectations, knowing that this is typical for children and their development at different phases in their development, that error is okay and error is a part of their learning process. So it's a mindset shift, and considering that we're prepared for students not following expectations, and it's how we handle that approach to redirecting behaviors. We don't label children as bad or good, or use terms or language and referring to students as you've been a bad boy today. Oh, thank you today for being a good girl. All children are good. There's no such thing as a bad child. So we want to steer clear of that kind of language and where we're labeling children. It creates a sense of identity. And children often start developing a complex that they are bad. And so that behavior almost seems as a natural reaction to what they've been labeled. So they don't necessarily see themselves as able or viewed as able to make good choices and be that good kid. And we also avoid using, approaches that are reward incentive based or punitive based, where it's a consequence directly after a negative behavior, because we see that from the restorative practice approach as basically putting a Band-Aid on the wound, and it's very temporary and it does not yield the results that we're looking for. We look at wrongdoing as defiance, where in the traditional approach, where in the restorative approach, we're looking at it as the approach to that's expected, that children, through developing a behavior, through natural childhood development, we know that children are error prone, and that it is our responsibility, both as educators and as parents to teach children how to correct errors and how to learn from them, so they can through self-regulation, they can make better choices. These are all skills that we need to teach. So they don't necessarily come from being redirected once or twice, but it's over time, and it's through discussions and conferencing, which we'll talk in the slides to come. So I spoke on a few of these points. Restorative discipline, restorative approaches is based in the idea that conferencing and discussion with children is the essence of how we model correcting behavior and how we self-regulate and how we make better choices. So to begin, that has to be done with developing a sense of community and a safe environment. And when we talk about a safe environment, we reference this with the regard of children feeling comfortable and confident to speak to the adult that they're interacting with. So this is both in the classroom and at home. They don't feel that they are going to be shamed or blamed when they've made a wrong choice, or they've not followed a rule or an expectation at home. Knowing that we have an opportunity to learn from mistakes. So this is something that we would recommend a parent to tell a child, that I see you've made a mistake. Let's sit down and talk about it, and see how we can fix this, or how we can turn this around. There's a step-by-step process we'll talk a little bit more about in the slides to come, but it has to begin with, one, developing that relationship, having a safe and comfortable and confident connection with your child, and making sure that shaming and blaming is not the approach we use. And so we know and recognize that through child development, children go through different phases and different understanding of and control of their physical reactions, coupled with their language, coupled with their self-regulation skills. One big aspect of restorative discipline is avoiding too much time focusing on the punishment itself. And so the time is better utilized, as the research shows us, in discussions with the child. So both opportunity for them to reflect, think about what was happening in the moment, or in the moment that the behavior occurred, and then opportunity to discuss and speak on the issue, expressing their feelings, their thoughts, their reflections, and then having them come up with the ideas to possible solutions. So as someone who has a stake in the issue, as the person at hand, they have the opportunity to also identify what needs to happen next, and how to correct the behavior in the future. Accountability is still present in restorative discipline. So I know some of the number one things I've had parents ask me in the past is, does this mean we don't give our child a consequence? No, that's not what it means. So children can get a consequence. They depending on the behavior, depending on the situation, it's parents' judgment to decide after the sit-down discussion, after the time of reflection, after those 5 magic questions have been asked. Then there is an opportunity to decide if there is a break time, a loss of a privilege, and the school setting, it might be still where students are receiving a detention. But through the restorative approach, it's meaningful, it's purposeful, children have been heard, whether it is the student who has been wronged or the wrongdoer. Both have an opportunity to express themselves. Both have an opportunity to share insight on what should happen next. This way, we develop a sense of ownership for the child. And so they are better able to embrace what exactly the wrongdoing was and take responsibility. And then recognize that there were other choices that they could have done. And then knowing that the outcome could have changed, and that's their plan that they develop for, you know, in the next steps forward or in the future. So there's some basic theories and values of restorative practices. Um, we look at some of the standards from restorative practices to best develop skills that help guide children's decision making. So at some point, they become independent, they become self driven, and then also self accountable. And so we look at the idea of choice theory, and we look at also the ideas of a shared concept of society. And so children need to understand what is the expectation in the community or the society in which they live in. So here are some of the core basics of restorative practices is that children understand what's expected in the community, whether it's in my home community, whether it's in my school community, or whether it's in the community at large. If they, as they get older and they are in more public situations and public, agency, they have the idea of what's expected of me in the group in which I am in. What are some of the norms? What are the social expectations? And what is my place in that? Whether I am on the giving end or I am on the receiving end, where is my place in that? So that needs to become a shared understanding to begin with. And so at home, in the home setting, this is something that usually happens very early on in children's early childhood, where parents are expressive and in basic language as to the do's and the don'ts and how everyone treats one another in the household. And so as much as we sometimes assume children should know certain things, we also recognize from the educational perspective that children need a lot of repetition. They need a lot of reminders and revisiting these expectations, specifically in their development through early childhood and adolescence, more so than we may as adults sometimes recognize or think that we should be or ought to be giving children. We see the research tells us they need these constant reminders and revisiting expectations. And we also need to explain the why. Sometimes we get a question about, why do I have to do this, or why can I not do that? Sometimes parents more so revert to saying, because I told you so. And that simply is not enough. If we want children to really embrace what we're asking of them, recognize it as a need, or it should be as we are telling them, we should be giving them some background and an understanding so they can truly embrace it and feel like it is fair and just. That's something we often hear is, but that's not fair. So we do want to explain ourselves. We do want to explain. And so that just takes additional time. It takes definitely some energy and some attention. But children do need to understand the why. And at the end, it pays off. We also look at the need for safety in terms of the environment when students are removed in restorative practices. If a student is, for whatever reason, being unsafe and are removed from the community, then we need to understand that although that consequence might be justified and be put in place, we need to understand that they need to be reintegrated back into the class community or the home community when a child is removed from, let's say, a small gathering in the home. and they are given a timeout, whether they are sent to their room or they are removed from the whole group setting. Coming back in should be with an opportunity, even if it takes a moment or two, to have a group kind of discussion or have some words, so the child feels comfortable and safe coming back into the group, as they were just removed for whatever error or behavior that they had partaken. So we want to make sure that reintegration is also an essential part. This happens in the classroom setting by generally having a restorative community circle where everyone comes together and expresses how they felt in the situation. For example, if a student was throwing pencils and a couple of kids get hit with the pencil and the student had to be removed from the classroom for that unsafe behavior, when the student is allowed back in, generally a community circle would be held. Each child has an opportunity to share how that made them feel and what they would have liked to have happened differently. And then that child also has the opportunity to express themselves, whether it's, apologizing or saying, I understand, whatever it might be. We want to make it obviously very personal, and we don't necessarily want to guide so much what the child has to say. We want it to be authentic and coming from that student. So here's to those 5 magic questions. So we're using questions. We'll talk a little bit more in detail and break those questions down. But at home, two common, many common situations at home is sibling, problems. Children have a dispute about a certain issue. And, parents may use similar approaches on how to address the problem behavior, or not following parents' expectations, not doing something that they were told to do. And so the first approach to use is a conference. And we call that conference, and this is, something that parents do every day with their children. This is just some of the terminology, is meeting and speaking with your child. One thing sometimes we do, especially if we are emotionally driven in the household, a parent might not give a child a chance to speak or be heard. And we want to make sure that that is not something that's forgotten. So one thing restorative practices recommends to parents is, if in the moment you are very upset or very emotionally charged, you probably want to step away for a few minutes, diffuse obviously the situation if it's a aggressive kind of situation, but to step away for a few minutes and then come back when you feel like you can speak to your child in a way that's non-aggressive and you are ready to also listen and allow them to speak. Recognizing that children should be able to express their emotions. Children should be able to cry, and children are allowed to be angry and upset. We sometimes parents may jump in and tell children to stop crying. I'll hear you out when you stop crying, or you can talk to me when you stop crying. We don't want to discourage children the opportunity to feel their emotions. If children are sad or upset or angry, it is a normal reaction to cry, and we don't want to mislead children and give them the wrong impression that they cannot cry. If it's hard to understand your child while they're crying, you make sure you're using the right choice words and saying, I can hear you and understand you best when you're ready, and take a deep breath and you can calm down. I can help you calm yourself down. You can use different techniques that would help calm your child, and then give them the opportunity to express what they're feeling, regardless of the mistakes they just may have made. We want to, and I'll revisit this quite a bit, in restorative practices, We want to avoid shaming or blaming a child about whether it's how they're feeling or how they reacted to their feelings, whether they got upset and threw something across the room. They may have hit their sibling. Um, we don't want to shame or blame them for that. We can talk about how that was wrong and how that may have hurt that other child, or how, breaking something was not a good choice and what it caused. But we don't want to put too much focus on the blaming factor or the shaming factor. We want to gear away from that. And then again, consequences can be used when appropriate. So, first focusing on the communication piece of conferencing, being expressive, listening to your child, hearing them out. Consequence again can be given if it's needed, but after that conferencing has taken place. And it is okay to also give praise and encouragement, even throughout this whole thing, throughout the whole conferencing process. And even if you've given your child a consequence, you can still praise and encourage your child when you see them trying to self-regulate, trying to turn the problem around. So again, here are some of the elements that I just spoke on. The restorative skills that when educators are trained on restorative practices, which is a scientific research-based framework on developing community and addressing behavioral issues that may take place both in the classroom and at home. When teachers and educators alike are trained in this process, there are certain skills that must be developed to help be able to implement the restorative approach. And one is being a very compassionate listener. And so a compassionate listener is someone who is able to stop and listen, have body language that is approachable and welcoming. So this is why a parent or an educator, just the same, may need to step away when feeling very, irritated, upset, frustrated with a child. That is not the ideal time to be having that conference meeting time with the child. So to be a compassionate listener, you have to be able to have a very calm, non-emotional, angry type of body language when meeting. Also be able to have a tone in your speech that is not aggressive, again, avoiding the shaming or blaming. And then be able to help turn around how we address problems, whether it be a conflict among children or a problematic behaviors that a child is doing. We want to be able to kind of realign how do we turn this around? How do we deal with problems? So conflict resolution is dealt in a way that's very systematic, and it's almost very ritualistic, where the emotions are kind of put aside to deal with the problem at hand, and then modeling to children how to self-regulate. We can't teach children how to calm themselves or not shout or be physically intimidating when the adult is doing these things. If the adult is, the first reaction is to shout or scream, then that is what we are modeling for the child. If the adult's reaction is to initially be very aggressive, whether it be in tone or in reaction, or shutting down and not wanting to speak to anyone, this is what children learn, and this is how they start dealing with problems and conflict. So Again, the social emotional learning aspect of it is the number one piece is the communication. And then, of course, showing empathy through it all. Even when a child makes a mistake, it is very, very important, very crucial for a parent to be able to show that child you can relate, you know how they're feeling. This may have happened to you at some point, whether as an adult or when you were a child. When a child feels that you can relate to them, they are more inclined to open up, accept the advice and the guidance that you are giving, and be able to see themselves getting past these kind of problem behaviors. So here are some of the steps and some of the examples that in restorative practices we implement in the school setting and encourage parents to implement in the home setting. So brief intervention to stop a problem while it's happening. Sometimes just stepping in and having a very 1 minute brief conversation to diffuse the situation. That's a must. If it's in the class setting or in the home setting, you might have a family discussion or a family meeting. It may not be at that moment. It might be at a different point in time within that same day, relatively soon to when it had happened. And deciding on how and when, with whom mediation is going to take place. And that just means conferencing between yourself, whether it's yourself and two of your children. So I've had parents, one parent mediate between a child and the other parent. And so regardless of where the conflict is, the mediator can be also an older sibling. Doesn't always necessarily need to be a parent. It can be an older sibling. It can be a cousin, an uncle in the household. Whoever feels it may be that is part of the home community that can assist and mediate the situation. Many conferences are held. Something we call peacemaking circles. Sometimes this is held amongst peers, so children within the class might be assigned being either the mediator to help create peacemaker circles, and then it can be a whole class or whole group meeting, and then sometimes in the school setting, this is not enough, and so this is where teacher might write a referral to the office so they can meet with the principal, and I would sit down with a group. It might be 2, 3, 4 or more students, and we might have a restorative justice meeting that might need a little bit more time and a little bit more support away from the whole group classroom setting. So, did we build any curiosity about what the 5 magic questions were? I hope so. So here are the questions, and I'm going to be posting some of these slides on Class Dojo, so parents who are watching this later or who would like to go back to these, you can have a copy of this as well. So some of the basic questions, the 5 magic restorative questions when you're having that conference with your child or children is what happened. A lot of times, traditionally we ask, why did you do that? We don't really want to know why. We have an idea why, whether they were angry and just reacted out of emotion. We don't want to know the why. We want the child to reflect and process and using their own words, say what just happened. So it is a conversation starter. What happened? Gives them also an opportunity to express their end of things and give their perspective. And then here is the second part of that question is, what was your part? What part did you have in this? Thereafter, you would ask, what were you thinking at the time? What was going through your mind? What were you thinking about? This can help the child get back to that moment and what was going on in that moment. Who was impacted by your action? Who did this affect? And so here's the opportunity for a child not only to reflect on what they caused, another student, but what responsibility did they have in the outcome of what happened? How do you think they were affected? So this affected, Miriam, and so, but how did it affect Miriam? So what was something that Miriam is now feeling because of this? And then what can you do to repair the harm? Now, depending on the grade level, the age of the child, you can change the words up a bit. So, oftentimes with younger elementary students, we may say something like, how can you fix this now? How can we fix the problem? What can you do to repair the harm is something word language we might use with the older elementary students or middle school students. So, the what happened, and it's referred to as a warm conversation. It's the acronym WARRM, and W stands for what happened. It helps you remember. It's kind of like a little cheat sheet. Our teachers often use, I often use as well. And so, what happened, and this is where the child tells you a little bit of the story, what happened, the what, the how, the where, and the when, and the who. The A stands for affect. So they're going to talk about the feelings and the emotions, who this affected and how and what took place with the affect, what they've caused and the effect of it. The R, for reflection and repair. So with reflection, here's the opportunity to the discussion of what else could you have done? Was there a better choice that you could have, done instead? And then here's where that discussion is, prompted, and then an opportunity to say, if you can go back and do things differently, what would you do different? And then repair. Here is the making things right. How do we turn this around? How do we repair the harm? How do we fix it? And then moving forward, is that for M is, here's the very end of the discussion is, okay, we can the student might make things right by apologizing. And here's where we would be very specific with the child. What are you apologizing for? And they would have an opportunity to turn and face each other. So they're speaking to one another to express what they're apologizing for. But it doesn't end there. The M is probably one of the most important parts of this conference. And it's making a plan and an agreement. And so here is where both children have a part in saying, what should be the moving forward? What should be the plan, and what would you two agree on for tomorrow or the next day, or whenever this problem may happen again? What can we agree on here for moving forward? And so both children would give an opportunity to say, well, I won't do this next time, but I will go and speak to the teacher. I will use kind words, or I'll give them a chance to, listen to me, and I won't react with hitting. So this is something that they both have a part in discussing, the moving forward part. So here are some approaches that we use for, restorative circles, community circles. They're called different things in different classrooms. With restorative practices, we call them restorative circles. They help build community in the classroom, a sense of unity, a sense of belonging. It's an opportunity for team building, and it's also an opportunity to develop mutual trust and respect for one another. Everyone has an opportunity to be heard. They go around. Teacher either uses a prompt or a question. There's a talking piece that's used. Anything can be the talking piece. You can do the same in your household. The person who's speaking is the only person, whoever has the talking piece is the only person who should be speaking in that moment until the talking piece gets passed on. Everyone else is listening and showing kindness and respect to the person speaking. So the research tells us that restorative practices contributes to many very important aspects and layers in developing well-rounded, healthy children and young adults. So we look at aspects like emotional intelligence, children being able to express themselves and understand what they're feeling and the cause of what they're feeling, being able to address behaviors that are considered bullying behaviors. Also looking at approaches that help teachers manage a large group setting like in a classroom, but also from the aspect of the home life. And for parents, it also helps reduce burnout because a system and a development of a process that addresses conflict and problem solving in a way that is systematic and in a way that supports also independence. So at some point, children are able to conference with each other, not necessarily with a facilitator. So once children understand the lines of questioning and being able to express themselves and express how the other person may have wronged them, through modeling, both teacher and parents can teach children how to manage their own conference, their own social justice and restorative kind of session with one another. So this helps also avoid burnout and stress for teachers and parents. And then also, of course, building confidence amongst children where morale is high and they are confident with themselves. They have self-esteem. They have the sense of everyone is included, everyone belongs, and then everyone is respected. And this school-wide reduces the issues of attendance because children are just overall happier and more confident to come to school and have the sense of feeling safe and comfortable with their peers and with their teachers. So a community that uses restorative practices includes all the things I just listed. And so this is, again, in a school setting, but we hope that parents adopt some of these approaches so it further supports the type of community that we're developing in the school setting because it ends up being mirrored in the home setting. I hope this session was beneficial to you all. And again, I will be posting the slides that I used on Class Dojo. Parents, if you would like to reference back to any of the slides and some of those magic questions and approaches to use with your children. Should you have any further questions, you can always email me. I'm happy to further discuss with anyone. We've also had sessions in person where we've modeled some of these restorative conferences or restorative justice sessions among students. I am more than welcome to do and schedule a in-person session if you should like. Here is a QR code. I would love your feedback on this session. So if you want to use the QR code, it's a very short survey. And like always, thank you for joining me. I look forward to the next session. Within the QR survey, please do share any other topics that you would like parent workshops on, and we will plan accordingly based on your interests and the need you feel is present. Thanks again, and we'll see you the next time. Bye-bye.
HES Academies have been serving the Detroit metro area for over 23 years, promoting academic excellence, leadership, and cultural diversity, ranking as some of the top schools in the state of Michigan. Our pre-K through 12th grade students enjoy tuition-free, state-accredited education by STEM certified and highly qualified staff with no geographical restrictions. and with advanced placement, college dual enrollment, scholarship, and Arabic language programs. Noor International Academy in Sterling Heights at NIAPSA.org. Star International Academy in Dearborn Heights and in Canton at StarPSA.org. Universal Academy in Detroit at UniversalPSA.org and Universal Learning Academy in Westland at ULAPSA.org. Join HES Academies today and enjoy a free Chromebook for every enrolled student.